it's not a project. But
hey, folks. So I want to talk about the whole flow of how to write a book. And obviously it'll be different for you, especially if you're type A and you're organized and you have no obstacles and all your writing is perfect, versus me, where I'm type whatever C, I'm disorganized, I'm creative. Some chapters were easy, some were awful. So I wrote this book called Things I Would Like to Do With You About Love. Obviously a big challenge with love is that it tends toward cliche. So it had to be personal, it had to be real, it had to be genuine. And if it wasn't, I had to pull it back through the editing process or the self-editing process. And I've done a video on the difference between working with an editor, working with yourself, self-editing, and working with a peer. And we can put that in the comments or the description as well. So folks wanted me to lay this out because often you think of writing a book as like you sit down at this cute little desk with a nice view of meadows and an old Welsh pony running around, and you have your coffee or your tea, and your cat or your dog, depending on if you're a coffee or tea or cat or dog person, and then you write from your heart, and then this overlay, the movie about your life starts playing in the back of your head with narration by Robert Redford or someone. And everything's just perfect, and you have this beautiful Mont Blanc pen, and so many movies begin that way. So the real way you write a book is however you're going to write it. It doesn't matter. It's personal. I wrote often in cafes. I like being in the social atmosphere, but I didn't want any distractions. So I wrote, often with a hat like pulled over my head in the corner, and people just thought I looked like an idiot and left me alone, and they weren't wrong. So I serialized everything onto Elephant Journal. I recommend you serialize it onto your own website or Elephant or some hopefully non-corporate blog. So the writing process took like a year maybe, and I just would write whenever I was inspired. There's different schools of this, write consistently, certain time of the day. I think that's wonderful for developing your craft and your skill, but I think if you're writing about a personal story, you can't have that schedule necessarily. You're gonna have to write when it's almost like when the tea boils and it goes, that's when you're gonna write. So I just waited until I was inspired to write something and until I had something to say. There's nothing more irritating for readers than reading the writing of a writer who didn't wait to have something to say. That's quotable, Mom. So the other thing is then the editing process was hell for me. If you're type A, it probably won't be hell. I am not type A. Luckily, I worked with an editor, Lindsay Block, who was type A. And if you're getting sick of me saying the word type A, I also am sick of type A. So we worked for a year and a half. It was heavy lifting. It was awful. It felt like giving birth to like all the fiber in the world, which is an awful image, and we'll move on quickly. But it was an awful, awful process, and I hated it, and I would have given up. So you need to find an editor who's patient, who actually like loves and cares about you, who loves and cares about your writing, and is willing to slog through it and kind of nurture the good stuff out of it. That process was helped by me serializing everything in individual blogs and getting feedback from readers. And I used the serialization to build up a huge, 100,000 fans before I had even published the book, 100,000 fans for a book that didn't exist. And then I used it to build up my Kickstarter. So this is also then the whole publishing. I wanted to print an eco book that wasn't plastic covered, and that basically doesn't exist. I printed 20 blocks away, not in China. So I wound up going independent. I crowdfunded it. I recommend this to everyone. I use Kickstarter. You can use whatever you want. Kickstarter actually has a deadline where you will lose all your money if you failed. I liked that pressure because I felt like people would give more. And but if you don't have that kind of confidence, you don't have a social media following, you can do Indiegogo or something else. I personally recommend having that pressure. So I kickstarted it, and that's where I got the money to print like 2,000 books in the very beginning. And once the books were printing and selling, then I had money to print more. So it's just like building a little fire and getting a bigger fire. So it was about a year to write it, year and a half to edit it, and then I don't know, maybe like a year to crowdfund and start actually selling the book. So I'm sure if I did all that again, honestly, it would be way quicker. But this is just a reminder to be gentle on yourself if it's taking a long time, and to make sure you have an editor like Lindsay Block who will stick with you through good writing and bad. And that's vital, because you're putting this book, if it's a physical book we're talking about, you're putting something physical out there. And, you know, in my case, I was writing about intimacy and loneliness and sex and love. And it really needed to be helpful to people and genuine, and also not super embarrassing to my mom, which was one aspect that I failed in. Thank you so much.